Good evening. We live in a world that teaches women to give freely, fully, and sometimes recklessly. We're taught that vulnerability is love, that openness is a virtue, and don't get me wrong, I believe deeply in vulnerability. I believe in showing up, in being seen, in risking the truth of who you are. Not everyone has earned the right to hold your pain. We say that often, but how often do we live it? As women, we are often encouraged, explicitly and implicitly, to share ourselves too soon, to be emotionally available, open-hearted, nurturing. And while that sounds like emotional courage, in reality, many of us have been conditioned to confuse self-abandonment for love. We reveal our wounds, our past, our trauma, not because we feel safe, but because we've been taught that vulnerability will earn us closeness. That if we show how deeply we've been hurt, someone might finally care enough to stay. But here's the truth. Vulnerability is powerful, not performative. It's not something you hand over like currency. It's sacred. And like all sacred things, it must be protected until it is safe. You see, when you meet someone new, especially in a romantic connection, there's a natural pull to connect. It feels good to be seen, to be heard, and it feels even better when someone shows interest in the darker chapters of your story. We mistake that curiosity for safety. We interpret it as intimacy, but not everyone who leans in to hear your pain intends to hold it with care. Some people simply want to feel needed. Others want to use your vulnerability as a map to control you later. And many, well-meaning though they may be, don't have the emotional maturity to meet your pain with empathy without trying to fix, minimize, or invalidate it. So before you reveal the parts of yourself that are still tender, pay attention to how this person handles the small things. Watch how he talks about people he disagrees with. Notice how he responds when you set boundaries. See how he reacts when you're quiet, moody, or not easy to please. That is where emotional safety, or the lack of it, reveals itself. It's easy for someone to seem compassionate when the connection is new, the attraction is strong, and the stakes are low. But your trauma isn't a test to see if someone loves you. It's a responsibility that they need to want to carry, not out of obligation, but from a place of deep respect and care. There is nothing weak about guarding your wounds. You are not being distant, closed off, or too independent by waiting to see if someone has the capacity for your truth. In fact, it's the highest form of self-respect. Think of it this way. When a wound is fresh, even the lightest touch can hurt. But once it's healed, a scar becomes a part of your story, not something you hide, but something you hold with pride. Still, even scars deserve context. They don't need to be displayed on command. You are allowed to have layers. You are allowed to reveal yourself slowly. That's not playing games. That's called discernment. That's called self-trust. You've earned the right to protect the most intimate parts of yourself, not out of fear, but out of love. Love for yourself first. So let your story unfold in seasons. Don't rush your blooming for someone who hasn't even planted roots. Let him show you, not just say that he is safe, steady, and emotionally generous. Let him prove over time that he can hold space for you without trying to fix you, that he can sit with your pain without making it about his discomfort. Because the truth is, anyone can ask what happened to you, but not everyone deserves the answer. There's something sacred about a woman's dream. It's more than a plan, more than ambition. It's a pulse, a quiet fire inside of her that says, I was made for more. And yet, too often, that dream is the first thing we dim in a relationship, not because we want to, but because we learn through silence, through subtle comments, through shrinking body language, that the space we take up starts to feel too much. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from dreaming next to someone who can't or won't see the vision with you. Not support it, not encourage it, just simply see it, to recognize that you are someone who carries a calling, who lives with a kind of internal compass that doesn't always point toward comfort or convenience. In the early stages of a relationship, it's tempting to lay all our cards on the table. We talk about our future, our passions, our someday. We light up when we talk about what keeps us up at night in the best way, what we're building, what we're chasing, what matters to us. But here's what no one tells you. Not everyone has the capacity to hold a dream that isn't theirs. And when you share your dream with someone who lacks vision, they won't say it directly, but their energy will change. They'll joke about it. They'll tell you to be realistic. They'll ask, but what about us? As if your becoming means you're leaving, as if your expansion is a threat. And before you know it, you start editing your own dream. You take the sharp edges off of it. You shrink it down to something more digestible, more palatable for someone else's comfort. But here's the thing. Your dream doesn't have to fit in his hands. It doesn't have to make sense to him. It doesn't need his permission to exist. Your dream is yours. And sometimes you have to protect it the way you would a fragile flame in a windstorm, cupping your hands around it, shielding it from the breezes of doubt and misunderstanding. That's not secrecy. That's stewardship. If you've ever had someone make you feel foolish for wanting what you want, you know how heavy that kind of shame can be. But shame only grows in the presence of judgment. When you protect your dreams, you're not hiding them out of fear. You're guarding them with wisdom. You're giving yourself time to see if this person can be a partner to your purpose, not just your pleasure. And here's the hard truth. Some people fall in love with the version of you that's easy to manage. The one that doesn't ask for much, the one that shows up for their needs, the one that doesn't disrupt their routine. But your dreams will disrupt something. They will ask more of your time, your heart, your attention. And if someone can't handle your hunger for more, they will always try to convince you that you're already full. But you know the difference. You know when you're being fed and when you're being quieted. So listen to that knowing. When you meet someone new, it's okay to hold that dream close for a while. It's okay to wait and see, can he handle the weight of my future? Can he cheer for me when the spotlight isn't on him? Can he stand beside a woman who's not afraid to want big, bold, beautiful things? Because if the answer is no, then it's not your dream that needs changing. It's the room you're sharing it in. There's a quiet danger in looking for your worth in someone else's eyes. So many women fall into this rhythm. We give and we give, hoping that in return we'll be validated, seen, chosen, affirmed. We bend ourselves into shapes that don't fit just to hear someone say, "You're enough." And for a moment when we get that approval, it feels like love. But it's not. It's a performance. And the applause never lasts. Self-worth that's built on someone else's validation is a house built on sand. The moment they withdraw their attention, their praise, their affection, you start to question everything about yourself. Did I say too much? Was I too loud, too emotional, too ambitious, too sensitive? You become your own biggest critic, punishing yourself for not keeping their gaze. But the truth is, the problem was never that you were too much. The problem was that you believed you needed to earn being enough. A woman must learn to hide her self-worth from validation hunters, those who come into her life not to love her, but to consume the version of her that reflects what they need to feel powerful. These are the people who seek admiration, not connection, approval, not intimacy. They are drawn to light, but they don't know how to honor it. So when you shine too brightly, they get uncomfortable. They might not say it, but their behavior shifts. You'll feel it in the way they become distant when you succeed, how they become passive-aggressive when you're confident, how they subtly diminish your accomplishments so they can feel just a little taller. And if your self-worth isn't rooted deeply in your own truth, you'll start to shape-shift to stay in their favor. You'll water yourself down, question your brilliance, and start asking for less just to keep the peace. But peace that costs your wholeness is not peace, it's self-abandonment. When a woman knows her value, she doesn't perform, she doesn't hustle for love, she doesn't mold herself into someone else's ideal just to be chosen. She already chose herself. She's not arrogant or cold, she's clear. She doesn't need to be the loudest in the room because her energy speaks before she does. She knows what she brings, and she no longer negotiates her value just to stay in a room where she isn't seen. And still, this clarity doesn't come overnight. It comes in layers, usually after a few heartbreaks, after you've given too much of yourself away and realized that no one is coming to fill the space you emptied, after you've waited on someone's approval like it was oxygen, only to realize you've been holding your breath for someone who doesn't even know how to breathe love into you. So what do? You stop seeking mirrors and you become one. You remind yourself every day that you are not someone's project. You are not someone's ego boost. You are not a trophy or a placeholder or a fantasy. You are a full, complex, evolving human being, and your worth is not up for debate. When you meet someone new, pay attention. Do they celebrate your self-respect, or do they compete with it? Do they feel grounded by your strength, or do they try to soften it to make themselves more comfortable? If someone needs you to forget who you are so they can feel good about who they are, that is not love. That's emotional theft. So guard your worth like the treasure it is. Not because it needs hiding, but because it deserves reverence. Let them earn the right to witness your wholeness, not through words, but through how they show up when the performance ends and the real you walks into the room. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up in your body first. It shows up in your spirit. It's the kind of tired that comes from always being the emotional anchor in a relationship, from always knowing what's wrong before it's said, from always doing the work to fix, to smooth, to explain, to translate, from always being the emotional interpreter for someone who refuses to learn the language of feeling. Too many women are taught that love means labor, that we prove our care by carrying the emotional weight for both people, that if we just communicate better, calm more quickly, listen more deeply, forgive more easily, then maybe, just maybe, the relationship will feel balanced. But emotional labor without reciprocity isn't love. It's unpaid work. And there's no medal for being emotionally overextended. When you constantly take responsibility for the emotional temperature of a relationship, you start to lose yourself. You become the peacemaker, the therapist, the emotional GPS. You know when he's stressed before he even says it. You offer comfort before he asks. You read the room so well that you forget to read your own heart. And while that may seem like kindness on the surface, what it often becomes is erasure. Because if you're always showing up for his feelings and he's never showing up for yours, what you've built is not connection, it's imbalance. And imbalance wears you down slowly. At first, it looks like pride. I'm just emotionally intelligent. Then it becomes frustration. Why am I always the one doing this? And eventually it becomes silence, a quiet internal knowing that this isn't how it's supposed to feel. That's why a woman must learn to hide her emotional labor from emotional absentees, not as a punishment, but as a pause, a test, a mirror. Because when you stop doing all the emotional work, something powerful happens. You see what the relationship really is. Will he notice? Will he ask how you're doing? Will he sit with your feelings without trying to solve them? Or will the silence be met with more silence because he never planned to meet you halfway in the first place? You cannot keep doing the work of two hearts while yours goes neglected. Emotional maturity is not gendered. Compassion is not a feminine trait, it's a human one. And anyone who wants to be in a relationship must learn to carry their emotional weight. It's not your job to make someone emotionally capable. That's an inside job. That's self-work, that's healing. And you can love someone deeply and still recognize that they are not ready to love you in the way you deserve. So yes, hide your emotional labor, withhold the automatic understanding, delay the immediate comfort, give him space to step into the emotional work. And if he can't or won't, don't make that your fault. Make it your clarity. You are allowed to want partnership, not parenthood. You are allowed to want a man who doesn't just receive your emotional care, but returns it with intention, with effort, with humility, because love without emotional reciprocity isn't a relationship, it's a performance. and you weren't made to carry it all. You are not too emotional. You're emotionally aware. You are not too intense. You feel deeply, and that is your strength. But even strength needs rest. Even givers need to receive. And even the most loving woman must protect her heart from becoming a utility. So stop overextending. Stop filling in the emotional gaps he refuses to notice. Step back and let the space reveal the truth. Sometimes the silence tells you everything you need to know. There is a kind of power in a woman that doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, calm, grounded, sure. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't demand validation. It simply is. It's the kind of power that comes from knowing yourself deeply, from walking through fire and coming out softer, not weaker, from standing in your truth even when it shakes. And yet, this kind of power unsettles people, especially those who haven't yet discovered their own. There are people, men included, who are not looking for equals. They are looking for mirrors, someone to reflect back the image they have of themselves, someone to affirm their place at the center. And when they meet a woman who carries herself with clarity, with purpose, with conviction, they don't see her strength as beautiful. They see it as a threat. And here's the trap. You start to sense that threat in the subtlest of ways. It's not always obvious. It might come as a joke that lingers just a little too long, a compliment that's half praise, half warning. You're really ambitious, huh? Or you always have to be in control. It might show up in the way he withdraws just a little when you talk about your success, or how he suddenly becomes more critical, more competitive, more detached when you're in your element. And so piece by piece, you dim, not because you want to, not because he asked, but because you've learned that the more you shine, the more he retreats. And you don't want to lose him, so you lower your voice, you question your intuition, you step out of your power and into his comfort. But power isn't something you turn off and on like a light switch. When you deny your power to make someone else feel secure, you don't just lose the relationship, you lose yourself. This is why a woman must learn to hide her power from those who want to dim it. Not forever, not out of fear, but long enough to discern, is this a man who celebrates my power, or is he trying to control it? Because some people are only drawn to your light when they think they can manage it, when they believe you'll stay small enough to never outshine them. They mistake confidence for arrogance, passion for aggression, leadership for dominance. And instead of standing beside you in equal strength, they try to shrink you until you fit into their idea of acceptable. But here's the thing about real power. It doesn't perform. It doesn't compete. It doesn't shrink to fit in small spaces. Real power walks into a room and doesn't ask if it's too much. It knows that whoever can't handle it isn't meant to be there. You don't owe your light to anyone who flinches in its presence. You deserve to be with someone who sees your strength and breathes easier, not heavier, because of it. Someone who doesn't see your confidence as an obstacle, but as an invitation. Someone who says, lead when you want, rest when you need. I'm not here to control you. I'm here to rise with you. But you won't know who that person is if you hand your power over too soon. If you keep trying to be less intimidating, if you apologize for being too driven, too opinionated, too much, let your power be the filter. Watch how he responds when you speak boldly, when you succeed publicly, when you stand up for yourself, even if it means standing alone. That's when you'll see his true nature, not in how he treats you when you're agreeable, but in how he responds when you're unshakable. Because power isn't just in what you say, it's in what you no longer feel the need to explain. It's in the boundaries you hold, the silence you keep, the spaces you walk away from without guilt. You weren't made to shrink for someone else's ego. You weren't made to play small to protect his pride. You were made to be in all your fire and fullness. So hold your power close, not in secrecy, but in reverence. Let it be a light, not a lure, a flame, not a performance. And trust, whoever is meant for you won't be afraid of the heat. They'll carry their own.